Hi and welcome everybody to the Endo Fertility podcast, where you will be empowered to learn how to thrive and conceive with endometriosis. If you want to understand more about your endo, how this can affect your fertility, and how you can personally take action to optimise your health and life, then this is the place for you. I'm your host, Dr. Lizzie Alexander, the Endo Fertility Specialist, and I'm a marine biologist turned integrative nutrition and health coach and holistic massage therapist. Most importantly, I know what it's like to have chronic fatigue, endo, and struggle with fertility. I am now a super busy yet thriving wife, business owner, and mother of a gorgeous little boy. Join me every Wednesday as I jump into topics that will support and guide your healing and fertility journey, from health and nutrition, lifestyle, emotional and spiritual support, and much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy listening. This episode is brought to you by my Endo Fertility Resource Library. Inside the library, you'll discover the free resource hub with 3 great downloadable products to get you started. An ebook called 5 Ways to Start Dropping Your Pain and Optimise Your Fertility. A short guide to sperm health, great for getting your man started on improving his own health. And an infographic with 88 things I did to get pregnant. Make sure to check out the show notes for the link. Hey everyone, this is episode 38 and I'm incredibly excited to share my interview with Danielle Ryan Broida from Four Sigmatic, where we discuss medicinal mushrooms and the role they can play in your healing journey. Now, we covered so much from Danielle's inspiring journey into the world of mushrooms, what functional mushrooms are, some of the adaptogenic properties they have, how they can increase your vitality and fertility, and what to look for when buying mushrooms, and so much more. Now, I first came across mushrooms when I was living in Jordan about 3 years ago, and the possibility that there was a food out there that could either stimulate you, help you cope with stress, help you sleep better, improve your mental and physical performance legally, and so much more was amazing. I remember finding Four Sigmatic and the Mushroom Academy and learning so much. It literally blew me away. I started to try them and really noticed the difference, including giving them to my husband before he did triathlon races, and he noticed the difference with his super porridge. It became a joke in the triathlon club because everyone wanted my super porridge recipe, as he was always doing amazingly when he had it and didn't do so well when he did not. Whether this is psychological or not, we'll never know. So here's a bit about her. Danielle is a key player in the worldwide mushroom movement. As a registered herbalist of the American Herbalist Guild, Certified Holistic Nutritionist, Instructor of Mycology, and National Educator of Four Sigmatic, where she teaches the world about the importance of a life on functional mushrooms. Prior to joining forces with Four Sigmatic, she received her Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies and Philosophy from Whitman College, USA. She went on to study Ayurveda in India and became a certified yoga instructor on the banks of the Ganges River. She then went and worked with a naturopathic doctor in Indonesia, where she became a certified raw chef and detox coach. But it was actually leading trekking adventures into the backcountry of Thailand where she became particularly fascinated by herbal medicine, while also becoming fluent in Thai. After several years in Asia, she landed in Boulder, Colorado, to formalise her education in holistic medicine. Upon completing her graduate studies at the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, she opened her private practice where she worked with hundreds of clients specialising in functional mushroom-based treatments for individuals with autoimmune conditions and chronic illness. So as you can see, Danielle has loads of experience and expertise and training behind her. She brings passion and expertise in herbal medicine, clinical practice, teaching, formulation, and a deep love for fungi in everything she does. Now, Danielle works for Four Sigmatic, which is a great company that started out in Finland by a guy called Tero, where his roots as a 13-generational mushroom farmer and traditions of drinking functional mushrooms with coffee have been brought into the mainstream, and which is backed by tons of scientific study. Now, I love their products and I've tried quite a number of them, and I've included a review of those that I have tried in the show notes, including a 10% discount code for you to use. So this is only for those in the US. Unfortunately, it doesn't yet work outside the US. Now, I can't wait for you to hear this episode, so here we go. Hi, Danielle. It's lovely to have you on the podcast. I'm really excited for our chat today as the subject of mushrooms and our health is literally blows my mind, and my science geek comes out completely.
Thanks so much for having me, Lizzie. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, first of all, I would love you to share a little bit about your personal story, because I always find there's a personal story behind people's sort of driving factor of what they're doing and why they're working and what they are, and how your own health played a part in this.
Yeah, absolutely. It really has been a lifelong mission for me, and I never expected or planned to focus on mushrooms as my career and my passion and my really work and soul and everything else. But from the time I was a little girl, I was obsessed with connecting to nature. And so I grew up in Los Angeles, and there's, you kind of have to work for it in a city. But I have recently, in, the past year, I moved home and I'm now in Venice, close to my mom. And we've been digging through all of these she saved everything. My mother saved every poem I wrote and all these pictures, and she has these boxes. And in the past year, we finally have the time to go through them. And it's been really enlightening. I found lists of, from the time I was 7 years old, like top 10 ways to save the planet. And I would write, I was obsessed with manatees when I was little. So I'd say, save the manatees, and first learned about endangered species, and loved going to the farmer's market and doing beach cleanups. And I'm not quite sure where it came from. I'm very different than a lot of my family in that way. Yeah. And I was like, what's going on? So there's been this connection to the earth and just admiration and awe for protecting our planet. And that's taken many forms. I studied environmental studies in my undergraduate and ended up moving to Southeast Asia, where a lot of my love for connecting to the planet through herbal medicine blossomed. So I lived with hill tribe villages, and there's such a traditional way of depending and needing the health of the planet for our own survival, whether it's to have a healthy forest to be able to forage and have enough food, or to have medicine. And I realized food is so important, but the medicine piece was this big gap. And I kept seeing through different projects I was doing and places I was living that even if we were really connected to the gardening or the farming or choosing sustainable food sources, there was this gap in that empowered connection to nature through medicine. So still relying on, the little plastic bottle with whatever's in it to cure our headache or to fix a scab on our leg. And it really lit me up. And I thought, okay, plant medicine. And I basically dove into every possible teaching course I could while I was living in Asia for about 3 years. I studied with naturopathic doctor in Indonesia, and I learned yoga and studied with Ayurvedic practitioners in India for about 6 months, and lived with all these Thai hill tribe villagers, and was like, okay, I just want to absorb as much as I can. And I ended up moving to Colorado to formalize my education in herbal medicine. And this theme of looking for the gap in that field, it just kind of kept arising. So within my studies with herbal medicine, there was very few lectures or conversations around the mushrooms. And I had a couple friends that were interested in mushrooms, and we would go foraging. And I started really on my own taking the interest, and went and learned from this amazing teacher, Peter McCoy, to grow mushrooms. And it just was this kind of in the background, little like spring that kind of kept calling my attention. And when I opened my private practice, it was really interesting. I had no set expectation of what type of clients would come to my door. And the theme was individuals who had tried everything else. And they came to me saying, the Western world doesn't have a name for what I'm experiencing. They don't have a cure or a medicine or they don't believe that anything's wrong with me. And so here I am. And what that brought was it really kind of helped my focus on what natural medicines were both safe and effective for these kind of extreme cases, whether it was autoimmune conditions or chronic illness or, just unknown ailments. And before I knew it, I started really keeping functional mushrooms as the kind of key ingredient, and I would do individual formulations for every client. And the functional mushroom medicine was so potent, and I was seeing such profound effects in a really short amount of time, in the holistic world, several months, not like a few days. And I just fell in love, and I'm like, where's the conversation around fungi and fungi medicine? And I really wanted to expand and get the word out there. I'm like, oh my gosh, we need this. This is amazing. And the more I started seeing firsthand the effects it was having in my clients and reading more and more about the clinical trials and the research out there, it was such a no-brainer. These are some of the most highly studied, oldest, several thousand-year-old tradition of use. And it really wasn't in any conversations, even through herb school or, in the naturopathic world. And so really from there, it's kind of expanded. And I think, that was 7 years ago or something when I first started functional mushroom-based practice and formulations. And it's just grown. And I'm so humbled and grateful and giddy to see the interest and that we're finally remembering how potent and needed the fungal medicine is for us today.
Wow, that story. And I love the passion that you can just hear in your voice, and how, you've traveled the world to learn what you have and then to bring it back. And I completely agree with the whole mushrooms. I don't know enough. I don't know anything in comparison to what you know, but I know when I did come across them a couple of years ago and actually realize how, like you said, how much research and how many thousands of years, in the Eastern, in the Eastern medicine, how long they've been using it, how much research there's been. Yes. And yet over in the Western world, we know nothing about it and haven't been using it. And it's, come as a surprise when, athletes might have used it and they thought they were doping, and it's like, actually, no, they're not. And that could go down the whole sort of rabbit hole there. But, they're amazing. They're amazing. And that's why I'm really, really pleased to have you here today to talk through how women with endometriosis, trying to get pregnant, can use and tap into fungi. So in terms of women with endometriosis, or actually before we talk about that, you didn't kind of mention the link with Four Sigmatic, how and when you got involved with Four Sigmatic.
Yes. Yeah. So after working in clinical practice, there was really like, okay, time to branch out, time to really, there was only so many people that I could work with one-on-one. And I was honestly quite exhausted. And I knew that there had to be a bigger way to get this really potent medicine into more people than I could manage on my own. And I actually found Four Sigmatic and looking for a product that met my standards as an herbalist. And there was nothing out there except Four Sigmatic. And we can talk about what that was, but using the mushroom in the way it's been used for thousands of years, preserving and keeping that tradition alive, extracting it properly in the original methods, combining it in formulation with other synergistic herbs that really potentize the effect. So Four Sigmatic was doing it right. And I'm like, this is perfect. What an easy way to get this into my clients' bodies without needing them to make a tincture and a decoction, which is a lot of work, especially for those that are already dealing with several health issues. So it was really fate. There was all these synchronicities that happened, but it was a little over 3 years ago. And I was on the Four Sigmatic website and had decided to close my private practice, and I was doing a bunch of other things. I was formulating for doctors' offices, and like it was all over the place. And this thing popped up, and it was like, we're looking for a national educator. And honestly, Lizzie, no one had ever looked for my resume before. It was like registered herbalist. I taught mycology, and it was like, there wasn't jobs that existed, that we're looking for that. And it was so wild. It was this list, and it was like, okay, check, check, check. It was too perfect. And I was like, okay, this is so weird. I didn't know if I was going to have to move to a different state, or I just kind of sent a resume. And I'd never really worked for a company before either. I'd always done my own thing and had private practice and been teaching. And I was like, this is just too ironic. This pops up. There's lots of other synchronicities we can get into, but essentially it was like fate. And it all came together. I had flown home to visit my mom. And then it turns out that the founder of our company lived down the street from her. And he's like, I need you to be here to interview you. And I mean, it was like, whoa, like one thing after another. And so I've worn so many hats at Four Sigmatic, but I've done formulations for us. And now I head our education. So it's amazing. And we're a functional food company, but we use these mushrooms in all products that we make. We use other superfoods and herbal adaptogens, but the fungi are front and center. And it's just so incredible to see the reach. We're now in 65 countries, and we have thousands of people that are using mushroom coffee and drinking mushroom hot chocolate in the evening, and mixing mushroom protein powders with mushrooms in it into their smoothies. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful chapter.
That sounds amazing. I've got goosebumps at the kind of like just how everything happens all at once. The universe came together and obviously wanted you to work for them and get your message out, which is amazing. And we will come on to back to their products and how we use them at the end, definitely.
Sure.
So
perfect.
In terms of women with endometriosis and adenomyosis, there are some classic issues that we struggle with, and I see pretty much every time with my clients. And the key point I kind of wanted to talk about around here was chronic stress, because I think this is where chronic stress and mushrooms can, really, really, can really help. And that's what I want to dive in with. And I found in that most of the time in the past, these women, the women that I work with have too much cortisol. I've had this, or they've not got enough cortisol because they've kind of gone to the point where they've got hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction. Sorry, that's a mouthful for the listeners. HPA axis dysfunction, causing this chronic fatigue, which is such a classic symptom with endo. And then this obviously affects your sleep cycle, and you get into this sort of vicious cycle with imbalance in your hormones, it affects your thyroid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd really like to take a deep dive into how mushrooms can help women that are chronically stressed to, improve their sleep and increase their energy. So maybe a good place to start would be what a mushroom is, and why some of them have special qualities.
Yes. Wonderful question. There's so much we can dive into here. So fungi are their own kingdom, and this is massive, massive kingdom. And the mushroom itself, when we say the word mushroom, it's actually the fruiting body. So it's the part of the species. Think of it like the apple on the tree. Mm-hmm. So the part of the species that's above ground or on the side of trees. And there's about 600-700 mushrooms that we call medicinal or functional. These are all legal. They have been used for thousands of years across the world, and they have known studied benefits to the human body. So within this couple hundred, really in the modern day, we're focusing on about 10. And we can really even hone it in from there. And the top mushrooms that we're focusing on, I believe, are because we need the medicine that they offer the most in today's world, which is primarily this support with the stress response. Mm. And these top functional mushrooms, things like chaga, cordyceps, reishi, lion's mane, they're known as adaptogens. And adaptogens, there's plant adaptogens, but these fungi are also adaptogens. And it's this class of natural medicines, plants or mushrooms, that there's 3 criteria to classify something as an adaptogen. Adaptogens are so popular, they're all over the place and there's good reason for them. But the kind of spark notes is they help our bodies adapt to stressors. And how they're doing that is they have to be non-toxic, right? So what this means is they're not harmful. They have minimal side effects on either physical or mental health. And they also have to be, this is kind of the tricky part, but also what makes them magical is non-specific, right? So it's this idea of resistance, adaptation. I think of it like a push-pull or gas brake effect. And so they have compounds that can either stimulate or suppress, activate or calm. And the action that will be expressed will be dependent on the body that ingests that adaptogen. So they really work with our bodies in this non-specific way. They're not pushy. They're not like many of our nervines, which are also wonderful herbs for stress, but those are directly, they have more of a direct action, right? So they'll directly put us to sleep, or things like valerian or chamomile or hops. Adaptogens are not that way. They're not necessarily sedative. They're non-specific. So they're really just helping our body with this harmonization. So the third classification, we have non-toxic, non-specific, is normalizing. And this is, that bidirectional effect. They're really, think of them like adding to the reservoir of vitality in our body, which sounds kind of funny, but I think about it like a reservoir in a city, right? It's this reserve. So in times of stress, in times of drought, the city has this pool to be able to rely on to more quickly and efficiently deal with that stressor, the drought in the case of a city. In our body, when we have adaptogens, we're building, I call it our vital reserve, so that we can, when stressors come, which are inevitable, we have the tools to more quickly, whether that's, in the form of antioxidants or a stronger immune system. We can get into all of this, but we essentially have this reserve to more quickly respond to the stressor and then bring our bodies back into this normalized state. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does make sense to me.
Yeah.
I did have a question, but it's gone out of my mind. So carry on with where you're at.
Okay. Yeah. So when we think about stress, adaptogens are really the gold standard. And functional mushrooms being some of the prime adaptogens to essentially help bring our body into the state of equilibrium, because our bodies are constantly calibrating, right? They're constantly working to keep us in balance, whether it's our temperature, our blood pressure, our blood sugar, right? It's like, whoa, we're constantly adjusting to the air we breathe, the water we intake, the news or the traffic. Like there's stressors constantly. And that's not necessarily the issue, right? The issue is when the stress becomes chronic, right? It's over and over again, both internal and external stressors. And we can't avoid stressors. So the conversation now becomes, how can we best equip our bodies to be able to respond efficiently and then bring us back, right? Bounce out of that fight or flight state into a place of balance and calm, where everything else, whether it's hormone function or, digestive function or the ability to fall asleep, all of this can begin to work optimally. But when we're caught in chronic stress, the glands that are releasing our hormones, they become exhausted. You mentioned this. We become lethargic. We start craving, salt and carbohydrates. There's alteration in our thyroid function. We have diminished production of certain hormones. And so because our body's in survival mode, right? Our body thinks that we have to respond to an acute stressor. And so I think of this chronic stress response state like everything else in the body goes on airplane mode, because our bodies think they need to keep us alive, to keep us, like in that heightened state, and nothing else works, So when we talk about fertility, it's absolutely integral to start with the state of stress, right?
Yeah.
Stress is hormones, right? Cortisol, adrenaline, these are hormones. And when we look at where these hormones are being produced in the body, we have to tonify and we have to nourish our glands and allow our body to actually give us proper signaling. Or, if we're caught in that fight or flight, we're not thinking about if we're horny or hungry or all these other hormones because we're in survival mode. So I think of bringing functional adaptogens like mushrooms on board as a way to almost clear. It's like a window that is covered in fog, and we have to clear that fog, remove the state of stress, remove that basically acute threat that the body is perceiving, so that the rest of our hormonal activity, the rest of our vitality can begin to kind of come back to life, can begin to start releasing and working.
So how do the mushrooms, because you said the mushrooms are sort of they're generalistic, that they normalize our body. Is there something that you can take here and there, or is it something you need to take for a long time for your body to kind of like adjust to having them in your body, to then for them to be able to work, or our bodies to be able to use them?
Yes. So they need to be taken consistently every day, which is part of the beauty of them. They're known as tonics. And we'll just hone in, this isn't all mushrooms. This is this very specific class. So we have, and they all do slightly different things. So while we've kind of set the stage that our cordyceps, lion's mane, reishi, chaga mushroom, these are adaptogens. So any one of them is going to support this normalizing effect of the body and help bring us out of that state of stress. Beyond that, they each have additional compounds that add to their unique effect in the body. And what's, this non-toxic effect, they're non-habit forming. So you don't need to take more and more to experience the same effect. They're more along the lines of building and nutritive to the system, which means it's not a pill for an ill. So you don't take cordyceps mushroom once and your sexual function is restored and you're fully out of a state of stress. What's critical is that our bodies it's like building this vital reserve, right? So we need to take them ideally every day for several weeks. In Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, royalty would take them every day for years as these tonics to really keep this vitality in the body at its highest peak, right? To enhance the functions of the body. So yeah, this consistency is quite important as we're building the foundation of our body. We're maintaining a state of equilibrium. And you don't have to worry about basically relying upon them. They're more, think of them more as a nutritive food that's building to the system.
Yeah. Same as you would take, I don't know, leafy greens, you eat them as part of your diet. They provide certain, nutrition. Yes, they support with your liver detoxification pathways and estrogen, this kind of thing, but it's about consistently sort of having them rather than having them for like 2 or 3 weeks and then you don't have to have them again. It's just part of that sort of profile of what you eat.
Exactly.
Okay. So maybe, because you've said the kind of like 10 types, but talked about like 5 specific types of mushrooms. What's the difference, just because sort of going back to a little bit of the basics, what's the difference between, say, an everyday mushroom, poisonous mushrooms, and these functional mushrooms? What makes them really special? Is it because you've said they're adaptogens, they live in specific places? What makes them different from your, white button mushroom or your chestnut mushroom kind of thing?
Yeah, so different. I love that you asked this question. If you're out in the wild, my rule of thumb, or kind of a fun, easy way to separate functional fungi from many of the classes that we think of, the culinary mushrooms like the portobellos, the poisonous mushrooms like the Amanita muscarias, or the psychedelic mushrooms, those all primarily grow from the ground, from the soil. Functional mushrooms are often growing from trees or fallen logs. And so a lot of their medicinal compounds are actually coming from the barks of the trees that they're growing from. So they often don't have this classic umami flavor or even the look of what many of us think of when we hear mushroom. So if you look at a reishi or a chaga, they look more like, chaga looks like a big growth on the side of a tree, and reishi is really conky and hard, and they have more of a tree bark kind of earthiness, bitter flavor and appearance to them. So they're totally different from, many of these culinary or poisonous or psychedelic varieties. And when we look at the number of beneficial compounds in them, so let's take reishi, for example, Ganoderma lucidum or lingxi in traditional Chinese medicine. This is the queen of mushroom. She's the most studied, the most has the longest tradition of use. And there are over 220 identified medicinal compounds just in the reishi mushroom.
Wow.
So we have 100 different of these. They're called polysaccharides, these complex sugar chains. In the mushrooms, they're 1,3 and 1,6 beta glucans, but essentially they're powerful constituents that regulate and act like cruise control for our immune system. There's also 120 different triterpenes. I think of these like mushroom oils. This is all still in reishi. And these terpenes are really potently adaptogenic, right? So supporting that HPA axis, actually helping our bodies to bind to cortisol and remove it out of our bloodstream at a quicker pace. So incredible mushroom for directly combating that stress response, along with the more balancing adaptogenic qualities, right? So these are really among the most complex foods on the planet, rather than having, maybe just some vitamin D or a high amino acid profile that we see in more culinary varieties, which is still wonderful. These functional mushrooms are really off the charts. They are the most complex, potent, natural whole species on the planet, due to either the sheer number of constituents that are present in them, or the unique way that the constituents act in synergy with each other, right? So when we talk about whole plants or whole fungi medicine, there's many compounds working together, right? This is kind of where a lot of the magic happens. And I almost think about pairing a whole. So it's not as if we're just isolating the beta glucan. Sure, that can be effective for the immune system, but when all of these, 220 different constituents are working in harmony, there's this like matchmaking effect that happens with the body. It's like our bodies are all unique. We have this bio-individuality, and then each species, whether it's a plant or a fungi, are also a whole unique being. And when we put them together, there's a unique interaction that takes place. So there's themes we can draw, like stress supportive with our reishi, helping us fall into a state of deep sleep, supporting the immune system. But really, there's going to be variance in every body that ingests that reishi, because it's working with you. This is where adaptogens are so cool. They're working with your specific needs. So if you're really stressed and you take that reishi mushroom, it's going to probably help calm you down, and help you get to sleep and bring you into this more calm, kind of chill state of mind. If you are really rested, and you take that same reishi mushroom and you're not in a stressful period of your life, it might give you a little more energy, right? And so there's this balance where I feel like they are revitalizing and helping us kind of show up as our most optimal vital selves, kind of filling in the gaps of our body, right? Giving us the tools that we need to be able to show up fully.
And that's amazing. And I think it's something I've chatted to some other people before about, using food as medicine, using food supplementation as medicine, rather than sort of referring to synthetics. And it's like the mushrooms are almost like a a really well formulated supplement in themselves that then your body knows what to draw from that without actually even having to do the work because it's within the mushroom itself.
It's so true. And it's, the compounds themselves are so potent. And then when we have this synergistic effect, it's like the sum is, what's the quote I'm thinking of? It's like the parts are greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
But yeah, even like the compounds themselves are profound in how they're affecting our body. So, 40% of modern medicine is created from some sort of fungi. 25% of modern medicine is made from plants. So we have these powerful compounds, and it's like, how can we stop separating, like, this is medicine and this is not?
Yeah.
This is our medicine that we've relied on for thousands of years to keep us strong and healthy, to support our energy, our endurance, which all comes back to the balance of our hormones and our endocrine system.
I think what you said there, and I'm going to touch on a couple of points here because I think you've explained that really, really well. And I just want to come back to the point about the combination of research and ancient traditions, because I think a lot of the time people want scientific research behind things to know that they really are working, but equally having that respect that ancient traditions have used mushrooms, fungi for thousands of years without necessarily having had research in the old days. They just knew that they were medicine, and yet they're also backed up with so much research. So the two combined together, it's like, how can you not look at these? How can you not realize that they are fantastic?
Yes. Yeah. The traditional, the traditional use and folk medicine is so potent. I think of, like, for thousands of years, people were using these mushrooms, and then not only were they not killing them or not having a harmful effect, they said, wow, this supported my, cognition, or this supported my ability to sleep, or this enabled me to run longer. And then they shared that information with their children or their grandchildren, and they passed it on. And then the children and grandchildren experienced the same effect and benefits, and on and on and on for thousands of years. So there's so much value in the tradition and the history, which I feel that our modern world has forgotten a bit. And we put so much weight on the science, which is also important, but to me, they have equal weight, right? It's like the traditional history, and now the science is really just confirming what our ancestors have said about these ingredients in all the traditional materia medicas and the ancient texts. And they didn't know the name of the 1316 beta glucans, or, the ganodermic acid in reishi and how that affected certain pathways, but they knew what it did, right? They experienced it in the body, and they felt that, and they documented it, and they shared it. And I find that we have started to shift away from just checking in with how we feel, and knowing that that is the most potent indicator if something is positively supporting our vitality and our healing. And so, yes, we have, of course, the research is wonderful, and our brand name, Four Sigmatic, actually means we focus on the 100 most researched foods on the planet. So we have hundreds of studies, if not more, about each of these mushrooms. But the traditional uses is really, I feel, is so powerful. And I really want to make sure that those stories and this tradition of using the mushrooms in these ways doesn't die, and we don't just hone in on the science, but that we remember, oh, this is how it's been used, because the science can only tell us so much, right? There's this bioindividuality piece that is critical, like, oh, in this part of the world, they were using the mushroom for this purpose, and at the same time, they were using it for something completely different. And so I try to not kind of box the mushrooms into one little label. It's like, this is for stress, or this is for sleep, but remember that they're going to kind of dance with your body. They're going to give you what you need. So yeah, this balance of the tradition and the science, like, of course, what are we doing?
I love that. Thank you very much. But we're going to jump on in a minute. I'm going to ask, without getting into too many boxes, what, specific mushrooms might be good for women with endo fertility. But before I ask that, just kind of going on the fact that, we talked about the ancient traditions being used for thousands of years. How can we make sure that we continue to use mushrooms, that we, that we learn the lessons of in the last 50, 60, 70 years, we have rather plundered the planet with our industrialized ways, that what we do by getting the word out there with the amazingness of mushrooms, that we don't end up pillaging, that we use sustainable methods, and how we do that. It just seems the right point to ask that question, how you think that we should go about that, where you should get them from, this kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the most important pieces, this is such a great question, is what part of the mushroom are we using? And if we want to keep the tradition alive, it's using the part of the mushroom that is accessible in nature, which is this fruiting body. And actually, when you're harvesting the fruiting body, right, we think of that like the apple on the tree again, we are not damaging the root system, the mycelial network of the mushroom. And so the fruit, you can cut off the fruit, and that species will, we call it a flush, right? It'll fruit again. And so this is why, if you're out harvesting your own mushrooms, rather than pulling it from the ground or pulling it from a tree, use a little X-Acto knife and slice from the bottom and just pull off that fruit. And when it comes to sustainability, we got to look at species by species. And right now, functional mushrooms, the tradition of using them is really deeply steeped in traditional Chinese medicine. So about 80% plus of the world's mushrooms are coming from China. And this is where the highest standards of functional mushrooms are coming from. And it's kind of funny because, so often we're like, have a fear around ingredients from China, which is fair if they're not native to that region. But with functional mushrooms, it is really important to go to the source. And right now, that's family farms that have been keeping the tradition alive, growing the mushrooms in the way that mimics nature. So with Four Sigmatic, we only wild harvest one species, which is chaga, and the rest we work with. It's the same family farm we've been working with for 9 years that are traditional mushroom growers of these species. And so you can do mushroom growing in kind of a farming method where we don't need to, especially with many of these functional species, the reishi and the lion's mane, cordyceps specifically, we never want to wild harvest. And so I would say go to the source, make sure you're using the fruiting body, and really supporting, this might be like but supporting organic mushrooms, and ideally mushrooms that have been third-party tested, because more than most other foods, mushrooms are bioaccumulators. It essentially means they can absorb a ton of whether it's heavy metals or beneficial minerals from the substrate that they're growing from. And this becomes so important when we're using them for our health, because, we don't want to be ingesting a lot of gnarly things that the mushrooms can accumulate. Like, that's awesome for the ecological system. And we could have a whole nother conversation about mushrooms saving the planet. And I really believe that the more we look into the fungi and start incorporating them, even in the form of, mushroom coffee into our life, the more we start to realize the ecological benefits of this entire kingdom, from, different biomaterials that we're creating, meat alternatives out of fungi, cleaning up toxic oil spills using this mycelium. I mean, it's endless. So sustainability with mushrooms, it's really, they go hand in hand. And I think the first step is just starting to connect with the fungi, use the real fruiting body, the mushroom that's been used forever, start incorporating it, and it's like this door will start to open. Like, what else can fungi do? And we're really, it's like this, they hold this ironic position because we're so standing on the heels of our ancestors in terms of using them medicinally. And when it comes to the potential for sustainability and where we can use them moving forward, we're at the very beginning of the potential applications.
Thank you. That's answered a few of my personal questions around sustainability and my interest in the environment. And I think I know that 99% of people will not be going out and trying to pick their own mushrooms. It's more about making people responsible and thinking where they're getting their mushrooms from, and questioning, whether it's Four Sigmatic or, other providers, that they're coming from the right place. And I think the point that where you brought up about them, potentially bioaccumulating heavy metals or toxins, I think that's really, really important. So, for people to be aware that this is something like, I talk to my clients, there are things that are really important to get as organic and some that are less important. And this is obviously one that's a key thing that you need to make sure that it is. So thank you. That's really useful.
Yes, absolutely.
So sort of moving on to maybe how specific mushroom type species, names can be used for certain things. So you've talked about reishi being the queen of mushrooms, really good for sort of the stress response. What about, and also the fact that obviously depending on the person can also help you relax and sleep. Are there any other mushrooms that are particularly good for the sort of stress response or relaxing and sleeping?
They're all going to support the stress response, but in terms of that kind of stress into deep sleep, reishi really is the choice there.
Okay.
Yes, but any of our kind of key mushrooms are, they're all adaptogens. They're all going to find this balancing harmonizing effect in the body. But really, if we're talking about a mushroom, before bed to help us into that deep sleep, it's reishi.
Okay, perfect.
Then we'll kind of walk through the cycle of the day. So let's say we wake up, mushroom of choice would be probably chaga or lion's mane in the morning. So chaga is when it's sourced properly, which is from birch trees. At Four Sigmatic, we get ours from the largest birch forest in the world. It's taiga forest in Siberia. So when it's sourced properly and extracted properly, it is the most antioxidant rich food on the planet. This is incredible. Antioxidants we could have a whole episode on just antioxidant support. But how we kind of put a little name to each of these mushrooms, because they do so many things, and it's important to have a little bit of a label or a nickname so you know when and why to use them. And chaga is your daily superhero. Chaga is like your bodyguard. So incredible immune support with chaga.
Okay.
It's wonderful in the morning because it resembles coffee. It's actually been used as a coffee alternative around Scandinavia, where it's native to. It has this bitter, earthy flavor to it. And coffee is, at least in the States, it's the number one source of antioxidants. It's crazy in the American diet. And so chaga as a incredibly powerful way to support the immune system, flood the body with antioxidant properties, give you energy without stimulation or without caffeine. None of these have caffeine, even the mushrooms that help us with increasing energy. The other functional mushroom, which is nicknamed kind of the nerve mushroom, we call it your brain's best friend, is lion's mane. Lion's mane is really unique, has nothing to do with the mane of a lion. It's Hircium erinaceus is the Latin name. And then we have all these common names or street names for the mushrooms, but it kind of resembles the mane of a lion. It has this white, stringy, cascading hair. It's beautiful, growing off the side of trees. And it has certain compounds that they're light enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, and they help activate this hormone called nerve growth factor. So really wonderful for basically focus, concentration, memory, stimulating neural connections, both within the brain and everywhere in the body. Wonderful, along with supporting the stress response, right? So great option in the morning. In the mid-afternoon, for like a maybe pick me up. And you mentioned this mushroom without mentioning it earlier, the cordyceps.
Yeah.
This is such a powerful mushroom. And really if you're going to look at a classic adaptogenic materia medica or herbal encyclopedia, cordyceps is going to be the one called out functional mushroom adaptogen. It's so wonderful for so many reasons. It's been used as an aphrodisiac for thousands of years. It's the athlete mushroom. It supports endurance and energy, the immune system, our respiratory system. I mean, it's incredible. And with cordyceps, and really with all these adaptogens, we can get a lot of information about what they do for the body when we look at where they grow, where they're native to. So cordyceps grows above 13,000 feet in the Himalayan mountains. Really extreme conditions up there, right? Extreme temperatures, winds, the altitude, the lack of oxygen, and yet it thrives, right? It's not only surviving, it's thriving. Same with many of these adaptogens. This is the doctrine of signatures, right? Like how something grows or what it looks like can really give us potent information about what it's going to do in our bodies. And so cordyceps, amazing ability to endure stress, to support oxygenation in the body, to give us this lift and energy without stimulating, right? So it can help oxygenate our system, and we don't get a crash after. Really wonderful kind of afternoon pick me up, or anytime you want to support. I mean, cordyceps is like, I feel like if there's one species I could recommend for everyone in the world right now, it's cordyceps.
Yeah. So if you've got like HPA axis dysfunction, you've had chronic stress for a really long time, yep, this is a really good mushroom to be taking then.
Spot on. So,
okay.
And good. I hate to, any of these adaptogens, they're going to support HPA axis. They're going to support stress response.
Yeah.
And yet, if we could and then they each have, additional benefits to offer.
Yeah.
But cordyceps, I mean, from the immune system, the stress response, the, respiratory focus, it's like such a perfect mushroom for
picking up on the immune response, because obviously, I say obviously, but with endometriosis, it is an inflammatory disease. It is associated all around, your immune system. Again, would cordyceps then be one of the ones that when you're trying to improve your immune system? Because with endo, I like to refer it as a discombobulated immune system, where it's kind of works in overdrive in some places and then completely misses the fact that you've got endo growing. So, your natural killer cells aren't working effectively. So is cordyceps one of the ones that would really help balance out your immune system, or, is there a better one in terms of your immune system?
So if we go out into the grocery store and we ask where are the mushroom supplements, it'll almost always be in the section labeled immune support.
Right.
And the reason is all of the functional mushrooms we've talked about today share a common compound. This is these beta glucans, these polysaccharides, these sugar chains. What these beta glucans do is they act as immunomodulators. Okay, so what this means is they're essentially cruise control for our immune system. This is why I chose to work with functional mushrooms in autoimmune conditions and chronic illness, is because each one of these, with the beta glucans as the primary compound that we've studied, they can either activate, stimulate immune cells or suppress immune activity, in autoimmune bodies based on the body and the time that they're ingesting them. So they're really so unique, different than any other immune herbs that push our whole system, but specifically our immune system, like, our echinaceas or our elderberries, great for a short term. They're stimulating immune activity. Mushrooms do both. They can stimulate or suppress. So whether it's cordyceps, whether it's reishi, chaga, lion's mane, these are all modulating. They're all balancing directly to the immune system. So if nothing else, like amazing long-term immune support. It's also, there's very few natural options that we can take long-term to support our immune system, because when you stimulate immune activity, it's essentially tricking your system, right? There's like an increase in white blood cell production. It's dangerous for more than 5-7 days. But mushrooms are having this balancing effect. So not only are they safe to take long term. This is the way that they've been used for thousands of years. Why they're called longevity tonics and, supreme chi tonics, immune tonics. They're meant to keep our immune systems in this state of balance.
Thank you. That was really, really helpfully, fantastically explained. Now, one of the questions I was going to ask you was, we've talked about the immune system, talked about stress. Is there anything, because this is one of the main symptoms with endo is pain. Can mushrooms help with pain at all? Or is that more difficult?
So this is a good question. I have to say they're not a pill for an ill when it comes to pain. And often when we think about pain, there's an underlying issue, whether it's inflammation, chronic stress, a deficiency in a certain mineral like magnesium that's not allowing our bodies to fully relax. And so rather than just directly addressing the pain, which we do have herbs, that can do that, Jamaican dogwood and California poppy, there's herbs that are directly supporting the pain response. Mushrooms are much more root-based. So they're working on how can we support the baseline systems of the body, whether that's gut health, the immune system, the stress response. And ideally from there, from creating this strong foundation, the pain will not be there. So it's like kind of fertilizing the roots of the body so that, if there's, like, I'm thinking of a tree and looking at this trees outside, if there's a leaf falling off it, rather than, okay, we have to kind of stitch that leaf back onto the branch, let's fertilize the roots of this tree so that, it has what it needs to be able to fix that leaf, right? And support the rest of the system.
Yeah. And I thought you were going to say that because it's the approach I suppose I take when working, is that in that functional nutritional approach is the fact that you're working to understand what the root causes of endometriosis or any other sort of disease that you might have. It's not necessarily about fixing the pain. It's what's going on underneath your guts, your immune system, etc. The same with sort of, when you're struggling with fertility. So it's what I thought you were going to say, but I thought I'd ask so that if people are asking that question. But one thing actually related to pain is, does it help in terms of your nervous system? So I suppose, yes, in terms of, because with some women, their nervous system is so heightened because of their stress that actually their pain receptors are heightened. Therefore, they feel pain more.
Yep.
Because they've had trauma. So therefore, it's almost like they're traumatized and they're more sensitive to pain. So could it work in that way, or do we not know that?
Yeah, what I'm called to share is a lot of times, as an herbalist, I work with both the physical medicine, but also the essence and the energetic piece, which feels relevant here. And there's a new field of study. It's very niche still, but many of us have heard of flower essences,
yes,
right? Like remedies. There's mushroom essences as well. So when we look at flower essences, which, we harvest the flower in the peak of its vitality and we put it in the sun from 12 to 4 and capture the energy of the flower into our spring water. With mushroom essences, you go and harvest under the full moon and you put it in a crystal bowl as opposed to a glass bowl with the flowers, crystal bowl, to capture the essence of the mushrooms. And the belief is that the fungi help us to see the shadow side of ourselves, right? To pull that out and be able to work with it. And it really mimics mushrooms in the wild, where they are growing in these dark, damp places. And we have these pain points in our body that are often hard to access. And so when we use a whole mushroom rather than, an isolated compound from them, not only are we getting the triterpenes and the beta glucans and, the amino acids and the vitamin D, but we're also tapping into the energetic piece that comes with these fungi. And just like our flowers, they each offer something unique, but overall they they're really, there's an amazing book called Mushroom Essences that is by a Canadian herbalist, Robert Rogers, who's really the first one to kind of call out the energetic benefits of the fungi. But I do think when it comes to trauma, there's a massive potential for the fungi to help pull out kind of these shadow pieces that are hard to access otherwise and help us work with them.
Really interesting space to watch. And I will definitely share that book in the show notes.
Yes. Wonderful.
So a couple of things around sort of fertility here. First, are these mushrooms safe to take when you're trying to get pregnant? And if you get pregnant, to continue during pregnancy, do we know this or not?
This is a wonderful and hilarious question. So much of the time when I'm working with clients or the herbal school that I teach at, we're just working to raise the vitality of the body, right? So removing food allergens, rebuilding gut health, strengthening the immune system, moving people out of this chronic state of stress. And a very, very common, I don't want to say side effect, but kind of end result is women getting pregnant. Right. It's often not even planned, but it's when the body is so full, right. And replenished and healthy and in a state where they're actually able to then get pregnant. And at least in the States, it's pretty sad, but it's illegal for registered herbalists to work with women once they get pregnant. And so there's this big gap. It's like, we're building the body, we're nourishing the roots, like the pregnancy comes, and then it's like, okay, I'll see you in postpartum.
Gosh, yeah.
And, there are doulas and midwives that will work with women during pregnancy. But yeah, I'll say a common end result of working with the fungi, really replenishing, raising the vitality of the body, is pregnancy. And then when pregnant, at least in the first trimester, if we're going by research, we have to say to hold off on using these fungi because they do really potently affect the immune system and the endocrine system. And we really don't want to interfere. That said, tradition is, I guess we unfortunately don't have enough research to confidently say, yes, use fungi during pregnancy. But in the building up of your body and preparing your body for mamahood, fungi are like absolutely critical.
Yeah. And it really does. It sounds like that from what we've been talking about. And it is interesting because I think, like you said, unless there's research being done on pregnant women, which who's going to want research done on them to chance losing their baby? Right. They're not going to. That's why so many things are do not take when you're pregnant. It's because research hasn't been done rather than it's not necessarily safe, as it were. But what I was going to say was ancient tradition. What do they do sort of like in China, Japan, in the East? What is their view on this?
Yeah, there isn't a lot of literature on the fungi in pregnant mamas.
So stay away.
Yeah, it's a big gap. I would love someone to have a research paper specifically focused on that, and then maybe they could share it in the show notes. But almost nothing that I've found in almost a decade of studying these species.
So, how should mushrooms be taken? We've covered it before. You've said take them regularly. So it is a little bit like a spice or a herb. You don't just have it one day here and one day there. You are taking it regularly on a daily basis. In fact, I've answered my own question because you've already answered it.
This is a great question because it's kind of the Wild West in the mushroom marketplace right now. So I'll share there's 3 really critical things to look for when you're buying mushrooms from any brand.
Yeah.
The first is using the actual fruiting body, using the real mushroom. There's a lot of brands just selling mycelium, which is essentially the root system, which has never been used in traditional medicine. There's about a 30-year history of it versus several thousand years with the fruit. So finding, making sure it says mushroom or fruiting body is key. The second piece is that the mushroom is actually grown on what it is found on in nature. this might sound simple, but it's like we are what we eat. The fungi are what they eat. And there's a lot of brands and people that are just growing the mushrooms on the cheapest substrate available. So we'll see it on a lot of cereal grains like oat and rice. And yet these fungi grow on trees in nature. Mm-hmm. And so log grown, and this can be done in a farmed setting, you know, with wood chips chopped up and then the mushrooms growing out of them. But many of the compounds that create the benefits in the mushrooms actually come from, you know, compounds found in the trees. So log grown is really, really important. And the third is extraction. We have to see this word extraction on any mushroom supplement that we're purchasing, or powder, whatever it is, because our bodies can't actually digest mushrooms in their raw form. We can eat them. They aren't necessarily harmful, but they'll more act like an insoluble form of fiber through the digestive tract versus actually able to get into all of those hundreds of compounds that we touched on. So, you know, I guess we'll get into it quickly, but mushrooms have a compound. It's in their cell wall. It's called chitin. Mm-hmm. It's the same compound that's found in many crustaceans. So like shrimp, crab, lobster shells. And our body doesn't have the enzyme to be able to break open that chitin. And so the chitin acts like a big wall that's blocking our body from being able to access all the amazing medicinal compounds behind that chitin. So extraction means that the chitin wall has been broken. That happens either through high heat, you know, boiling the mushroom, or through tincturing the mushroom through alcohol. And that ensures that all the amazing compounds are actually bioavailable to your body. So fruiting body, log grown, and extracted is really key. And if you hit all those, and, you know, of course, organic, then whether it's in a powder or mixed in a coffee or in a capsule, like, you're good to go.
So with the extraction, because this is something that's a classic with so many things like oils, you know, omega-3 being one of those ones where they're heat treated. And then if they're heat treated, it becomes pointless. Is there any extraction technique where it ruins the quality of the mushrooms that we should be looking for?
Yeah, non-extracted is really what we're looking for.
So it is going back to the non-extracted. Okay.
Yeah, you see words like fermented and micronized and all these other things. And basically what that means is your body can't access the medicine. So if it says extracted, it means it's either been, there's really only these two methods to properly extract that we know traditionally and via the research, which is long hot water, it's a decoction method, or through the tincture. And both pull out different compounds. So one's not necessarily better than the rest. A double extraction or a dual extraction is kind of like eating the whole animal if you eat meat, right? Getting all of the medicine out of the mushroom. So that's the dual extraction is going to be that gold standard.
Amazing. That's blown me away. There's a lot of amazing information. So are there any resources in terms of Four Sigmatic or things you want to share or highlight that people should refer to?
So many. I created a free mushroom academy, which is a great place if people want to keep learning. And it's on foursigmatic.com. And then it's completely free. There's a little link towards academy, and there's videos, and you can learn a bit more about each of the fungi or the fungi kingdom in general. And also on that page, I link out some of my favorite books and additional resources to keep learning and keep in touch. We have an amazing team at Four Sigmatic. I'm always available to share any questions that people have. I think we're all in this together. It's what fungi teach us, is this power of connectivity. So really just opening the door and walking this path together.
Excellent. And I just want to say how good the library is. I know I came across it 3 years ago. And, you know, I watched it all. There's so much information on there. I suppose it's where I, you know, learned a lot of what I learned about. And then I used that with my husband's does triathlon Ironman. And I made him like special porridge, like super mushroom porridge. And everyone else in the triathlon club was like, whenever I gave it, what are you feeding him? He's just so quick. And I'm like, haha, it's the special porridge. And everyone was like, can we have the special porridge? And it was amazing. And it was amazing. The effect when he started taking it after a while, it was amazing. And it's because I'd learned everything, I learned through the free resources on Four Sigmatic's, website, and it was amazing. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Lizzie. That's so cool to know.
So some of the sort of questions I ask always at the end of these interviews is, so why did you want to inspire and help other men and women, people on the planet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that in order to really show up and fulfill our life calling, I think each of us have a specific gift that we're meant to share with the world. And we can't do that if we are depleted, if we're stressed, if we're not sleeping, if we're deficient in basic nutrients. And if we do try to give from that state, it's depleting us more and more, right? Like a cup that isn't full. And where I feel that the fungi come in is filling up our cup, right? Building, nourishing, revitalizing our bodies, our nervous systems, our immune systems, to enable us to be full enough that we can give our gifts, that we can show up, that we can, be the best versions of ourselves and live in purpose in an endless way, right? By giving and showing up in that way. Once we're full, we're not draining from ourselves anymore, right? We have an overflow to give. So it really feels like, how can we nourish our roots so that we can grow?
Thank you. That was beautiful. Finally, a question I always ask is, if women listening today could take away one thing from you, what would that be?
Start bringing functional fungi into your life today, right? This is your message. The moment you're listening to this, they're so powerful. They're so safe. They're so effective. And as women specifically, we get to carry on the tradition of the medicine women that have been keeping these fungi alive for thousands of years. And I feel that it's our time to remember and to reap the benefits that they can offer. So in any form, as long as you're checking those buckets, whether it's into your morning coffee or into your smoothie or making this super porridge, this is your time. Bring the mushrooms on board now.
Thank you. I love that. And I know that people are going to go out, and they really will do. So where can women find and connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is danielleryanwellness.com. And on social, I'm Danielle Ryan Broida. And then, of course, through Four Sigmatic, we are at Four Sigmatic on all social channels, and foursigmatic.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Danielle. You have been an amazing guest with so much information. I know this episode is going to be mind-blowing for many, many women who have not come across functional mushrooms. So really, thank you ever so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and have some useful tips and actions you can take away and put into practice. This podcast is to add to your knowledge so you can delve into the whys behind your endo and fertility struggles and move forward with thriving and conceiving. It is not meant to replace your current medical advice. If you loved listening, then make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. It would be amazing if you could take a minute to leave a review, as it will help in reaching more women who might benefit. Even better, if you know someone who would love to listen to this episode, then please share. If you want to find out more about who I am and what I do, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I also have a private Facebook group, Thrive and Conceive with Endometriosis, where I share all sorts of nutrition and health nuggets. My website, endofertilityspecialist.com, provides you with lots of information, including my Endofertility one-to-one health coaching program. Lastly, don't forget to sign up to my Endofertility Inner Circle to receive weekly news. The links are all in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you next week for another episode.